In the spring of 1943, the consensus among Allied leadership was grim and absolute. The war in the Atlantic was being lost, and the reason was physics. In classified papers, men like Professor Patrick Blackett explained the predicament. Dr. Harold Burris, the Admiralty's chief naval architect, formalized it in a memorandum dated February 14th. A Liberty ship, displacing thousands of tons, turned a 15-foot propeller. The resulting cavitation, bubbles collapsing against the blades, broadcast a sonic beacon. German hydrophones, optimized for this exact frequency range, could hear this sound from 80 nautical miles away. To stop the noise, Burris argued, would require a complete propulsion redesign, taking 6 months in dry dock for every single vessel. It was, in short, impossible. This technical reality translated into a devastating arithmetic. In March of 1943 alone, German U-boats sent 567,000 tons of Allied shipping to the ocean floor. Britain, dependent on the sea for 2/3 of its food and 100% of its petroleum, had only 3 months of supplies remaining. Prime Minister Winston Churchill would later admit the U-boat peril was the only thing that truly frightened him during the war. At the Atlantic Convoy Conference on March 4th, Rear Admiral Leonard Murray stated the situation bluntly. The Allies were losing. The experts proposed solutions: rubber-coated hulls, intricate machinery mounts, new propellers, but all were rejected as too slow, too expensive, or technologically unfeasible for a nation at war. The consensus held: the ships were loud, and they would stay loud. Hundreds of miles away, a man with no engineering credentials was about to prove them all wrong. Thomas Patrick Lawson was a 28-year-old cook aboard the SS William Eustis. A South Boston native who had left school at 14, he joined the Merchant Marine not for heroism, but for the pay, $125 a month. On February 19, 1943, during a U-boat attack on convoy SC-118, Lawson was in the engine room, a place he wasn't supposed to be. He heard the muffled detonation as a torpedo struck a nearby vessel. But it was the sound that followed the explosion that caught his attention. He heard the rush of the Atlantic flooding the doomed ship's hull, and then, distinctly, he heard the ship's machinery noises cease. The sinking vessel had become acoustically silent. An idea struck him. He approached the ship's engineer, a Scotsman named Donald MacLeod, and asked what would happen if they intentionally flooded small parts of their own ship, not to sink it, but to use the water as insulation. MacLeod's reaction was immediate contempt, calling it the stupidest idea he had ever encountered. Undeterred, Lawson sketched diagrams of water-filled chambers positioned against the propeller shaft and engine mounts. He was laughed at by the first mate and politely dismissed by Captain Bannerman, who advised him to leave engineering to the engineers. On March 24, 1943, the William Eustis docked in Liverpool. Lawson took his notebook, walked directly into the Western Approaches Command headquarters, and announced to the lobby that he had a solution to the U-boat problem. He was promptly arrested by the Royal Navy Shore Patrol. As he was being forcibly escorted from the building, a voice cut across the lobby. "Wait." It belonged to Commander Peter Gretton, a 29-year-old escort commander who was exhausted, furious, and desperate. He had just lost 13 merchant ships in convoy ONS-5 and was willing to listen to anyone. Gretton, risking his career, smuggled Lawson into the HM dockyard. They chose the corvette HMS Sunflower, then in dry dock. For 3 days, Lawson, Gretton, and the ship's engineer, Lieutenant James Whitby, secretly modified the warship, welding sealed steel chambers around the propeller shaft housing and bracing rubber bladders filled with water against the engine mounts. On April 2, 1943, they conducted a second test with the submarine HMS Trespasser listening. The results were unbelievable. The submarine captain reported he lost all sound from the Sunflower at 400 yards. Lawson's crude system had reduced the ship's acoustic signature by 97%. The next day, April 3rd, Gretton brought Lawson before Admiral Max Horton, Commander-in-Chief of Western Approaches, and the same Dr. Harold Burris, who had declared the problem impossible. Burris was appalled, calling the unauthorized modification preposterous. But Horton, facing the collapse of Britain's supply lines, silenced him. He looked at the American cook and authorized an operational test. 6 merchant ships in convoy ONS-184, including Lawson's own William Eustis, were fitted with the liquid acoustic dampening system. The modification took only 64 hours and cost $20,000 per ship. On April 22, the convoy sailed into the mid-Atlantic, where Wolfpack Group Miza, consisting of 37 U-boats, was waiting. The results were immediate and decisive. Aboard U-264, the hydrophone operator reported his contacts were intermittent. Some ships were loud, while others were almost silent. The Wolfpack attacked, sinking 9 merchant ships. But when convoy ONS 184 reached New York, the analysis revealed a staggering statistic. Of the 9 ships sunk, 0 were the modified vessels. Lawson's system had made them invisible to the U-boats. This test triggered the turning point of the war. The innovation was implemented fleet-wide. May of 1943 became known in German naval history as Black May. The Allies sank 41 U-boats, a quarter of Germany's operational fleet. Admiral Karl Dönitz, the U-boat commander, wrote in his war diary on May 24 that the enemy had robbed U-boats of their most effective weapon, and that convoys had become nearly invisible. The numbers compiled by the Admiralty were stark. Lawson's system reduced ship losses by 85%. U-boat losses increased 400%. An estimated 4,200 merchant seamen were saved. The principle evolved into the Prairie Masker noise reduction system, which is still standard on United States Navy warships today. And the man who made it possible? Thomas Patrick Lawson received the British Empire Medal, then returned to Boston. He opened a small diner, married, and had 3 children. He never spoke publicly about his contribution. When he passed away in 1991 at the age of 76, his obituary described him as a retired restaurant owner and merchant marine veteran with no mention of the 4,200 lives he saved, or the fact that a cook with a notebook had solved the problem that baffled the world's greatest engineers.